I'd gotten used to the quiet in my building. Too used to it, maybe. Nights blurred together, microwave dinners, the glow of my laptop, a phone I never seemed to text anyone on. Most mornings I left for class at the same time as my upstairs neighbor came back from her run. We usually crossed paths by the mailboxes. She was in her 40s, maybe mid, maybe late. It didn't matter. She always had this steady way about her, like she'd already figured out things I hadn't even thought to ask. That morning, though, she stopped instead of just nodding. "You're up early," she said, catching her breath, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I glanced at my coffee thermos, then back at her. Big day. Or, just pretending it is. She smiled, one of those small, tired ones, like she understood pretending. I didn't know her name yet, not officially. Just, the woman upstairs, which felt too impersonal for how often I'd memorized the sound of her footsteps above mine. Later that week, I ran into her again, this time at the corner laundromat. I'd thrown my clothes in the dryer and was half watching the spin when I heard her voice. "You too?" she said, setting her basket down. "Yeah. I keep putting off buying more socks." That earned me a laugh, quiet, but real. She sat on the bench across from me, tapping her fingers against her folded laundry. I noticed her nails, clean but unpolished. The way she kept checking her phone, like she wasn't expecting anything but hoped anyway. I knew that gesture. My own phone screen was blank in my pocket. She broke the silence first. "You in school?" "Trying to be. Mostly I'm just, there." She nodded, folding a shirt slowly, like she was thinking of something else. I remember those years. Half of life feels like waiting rooms. I didn't know what to say to that, so I folded my hoodie into a square smaller than it needed to be. We sat like that for a while, the hum of the dryers filling in the words we didn't bother with. It was strangely easy, like not talking was the point. When my cycle beeped, I packed up, gave her a quick nod, and left. I thought that was it. Just a passing neighbor moment. But later that night, when I got back to my apartment, there was a folded slip of paper taped to my door. Her handwriting, looping and careful, "You forgot this in the laundromat." Inside was one of my socks. Clean, folded. It was ridiculous, but I laughed, really laughed, alone in my apartment. I'd been carrying around this weight of silence for so long, and now here was this tiny, ordinary thing. A sock. I wanted to thank her. I typed out a text, "Appreciate you saving my sock, neighbor." Deleted it. Wrote another, "Drinks on me sometime." Deleted that too. Finally I just left it blank, staring at the message field until my phone screen went dark. The next morning, when I opened my door, she was locking hers. She looked up, and for half a second it felt like we were caught in the same thought. She tilted her head. "Coffee?" I hesitated. My bag was heavy on my shoulder, my heart heavier for no good reason. But I said yes. And that's how it began, the first time I'd had company in what felt like forever. Her apartment looked almost identical to mine, but it felt different, lived in, softened by time. A stack of books leaned against the wall near her couch. The faint smell of chamomile lingered in the air. "Sit," she said, setting her keys in a bowl by the door. "I'll make tea. Coffee after noon is a crime." I sat. The cushions dipped deeper than mine ever had, like they'd been molded by years of people who used to come by. People who didn't anymore. She brought over 2 mismatched mugs, steam curling up between us. I noticed the faint tremor in her hand as she set mine down. Maybe she thought I wouldn't see. "Thanks," I said. My voice sounded smaller than I meant. She leaned back, cupping her own mug. "So. Tell me something about you that isn't socks and lectures." I laughed softly. "Not much to tell." I traced a finger along the rim of the mug, buying time. "I used to write. Poems, mostly. Nothing good. Her gaze sharpened, but she didn't smile. That's not nothing. I shrugged. Haven't touched it in years. Feels like it belonged to someone else. Her eyes drifted to the window, where the late afternoon light slanted across the blinds. I know that feeling. The silence stretched, not awkward, just weighty. Like she'd given something of herself in that pause. I wanted to ask what she meant, but I didn't. Instead, I noticed her hair was still damp from her run. A small bead of water clung to a strand, catching the light. I looked away too quickly. She changed the subject herself. I was married once. Long ago. She said it like a fact, not an invitation for sympathy. Doesn't quite stick the way it used to, but, well. You know how some words never go away. I nodded. My chest tightened in a way I couldn't name. Married once. Alone now. The risk of being here finally caught up to me. A woman twice my age, my neighbor, someone I'd pass every day whether this went somewhere or not. I thought about what people would say, what my parents would say. The picture of it felt almost embarrassing, yet sitting across from her didn't. That was the strange part. She must have seen the conflict flicker across my face because she gave a small smile, dry but gentle. Don't look so serious. It's only tea. But it wasn't only tea. My hands were too aware of the warmth of the mug, my pulse too aware of the space between us. We talked after that, nothing extraordinary. She asked about school again. I asked about the books by her couch. Turns out half of them weren't even hers, people had left them behind over the years, and she couldn't bring herself to throw them away. When I stood to leave, she followed me to the door. I bent to slip on my shoes, and when I straightened, she was close, closer than the polite distance neighbors usually keep. She reached past me to the light switch, her fingers brushing my sleeve. Barely a touch, but it jolted something I wasn't ready to name. She flicked off the light, leaving only the hallway glow between us. "Good night," she said softly. I carried that brush of her hand with me all the way downstairs, like a secret I wasn't supposed to have. After that night, I started listening for her door. The soft click of it closing, the shuffle of her steps overhead. It was ridiculous, half my attention lived upstairs. We found excuses. A borrowed book. A plate of leftover pasta she made too much of. I told myself it was neighborly. Normal. It wasn't. One evening, I knocked on her door without really meaning to. My knuckles barely touched the wood, but it opened anyway. She stood there barefoot, sweater sleeves pushed up, the faint smell of onions and rosemary trailing from the kitchen. "You're just in time," she said. "I can't eat all this by myself." I stepped in, heart thudding. The table was already set, 2 plates, 2 glasses. Too neat to be an accident. Dinner was quiet. Comfortable, then not. She asked about school, but halfway through my answer her eyes went distant, like she was somewhere else. "You okay?" I asked. She blinked, then smiled. "Just remembering something." She didn't say what. The silence between us felt different this time. Thicker. Halfway through, there was a knock at the door. She stiffened. I froze. It was her friend from upstairs, the woman I'd seen once in the hallway, older too, carrying groceries. "Just checking in," the friend said, peering inside. Her gaze flicked from me to the plates on the table. "Stayed a little too long." "I'll call you later," my neighbor said quickly, stepping half into the doorway. The friend hesitated, then left. She closed the door and leaned against it for a second, like bracing herself. "Sorry," she muttered. She notices things. I tried to laugh it off, but my throat was dry. "Well. Neighbors, right?" She didn't answer. Instead, she cleared the plates too quickly, avoiding my eyes. I wanted to say something, anything to pull her back, but the words stayed stuck. So I just helped. Drying the dishes, handing them to her one by one. Our fingers brushed twice, maybe 3 times. Each time felt like too much. When we were done, she leaned against the counter, arms crossed, studying me. Not smiling. Not frowning. Just looking like she was deciding something. You should, she started, then stopped. Her eyes flicked toward the door, then back at me. I should what? I asked. Her lips parted, then closed again. She shook her head. Nothing. Her sweater brushed my sleeve. Her breath caught, I heard it. For a second, just a second, the room tilted toward something I couldn't undo. Then she reached past me for a dish towel, breaking the line between us. Good night, she said, too softly. I stood there longer than I should have, trying not to imagine the words she almost said. It was late afternoon when I saw her sitting on the bench outside the building. A paperback face down in her lap, sunglasses pushed into her hair. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep, but the kind you carry around. I hesitated at the door, then went over. Mind if I, she shifted, making space without looking at me. We sat side by side, the hum of distant traffic filling the silence. I picked at a loose thread on my sleeve. She tapped the edge of her book against her knee, over and over. Finally she said, "My ex called yesterday." The words landed heavy between us. I kept my voice even. That, good or bad? She gave a quiet laugh, sharp around the edges. Neither. Just inconvenient. I waited, but she didn't go on. So I said nothing. A long pause. Then, he asked if I was lonely. Her shoulders tensed, like she regretted saying it aloud. I stared at the pavement. And maybe I am. But not in the way he thinks. She turned her head slightly, studying me with that level gaze that always left me too exposed. Something inside me tightened. Jealousy. I hated that I cared who she answered late-night phone calls from. I tried to joke. Well. You've got your socks to keep you company. She didn't laugh. You're too young for this. The words hit harder than I expected. Too young for what? Her hands clenched around the book. For being here. For listening to me say things I shouldn't. My pulse kicked up. I want to listen. Her breath caught. A small sound, almost a protest. She shook her head, but softer this time, like she wasn't sure anymore. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, trying to keep my voice steady. You think I don't know how people see it? You. Me. But I stopped. The confession stuck in my throat. She turned away, staring at the horizon where the sun slid lower, staining the buildings orange. You'll regret it, she whispered. Maybe she meant me. Maybe herself. The silence stretched. I could hear her breathing, shallow and careful. My fingers twitched at my side, wanting to reach for her hand, just to ground her. To ground myself. Instead, I asked, what if I don't? That made her finally look at me. Her eyes were wet, though she wasn't crying. For a moment, it felt like she might say everything she'd been holding back. Her lips parted, the words trembling there. Then she pressed them shut again. Closed the book in her lap with a soft thud. Not here, she said. The light shifted, throwing her face into shadow. And just like that, the wall was back up. But I'd seen the crack in it, and I couldn't unsee it. For a week, I didn't see her. No footsteps above mine, no casual knocks on my door. Just silence, and the faint ache of waiting for a sound that never came. I told myself it was nothing. People get busy. People need space. But every time I passed her door, I slowed down. Once I even raised my hand to knock, then dropped it before my knuckles touched the wood. On the 8th day, I ran into her outside the building. She was carrying grocery bags, but not alone. A boy, 18, maybe 19, walked beside her, headphones dangling around his neck. He looked like her, in the way sons sometimes do. She caught my eye, froze for half a second, then smiled too quickly. "This is Daniel," she said. "My son." I muttered something, "Hello, maybe," while he gave me the polite nod kids give their moms' acquaintances. Then they disappeared upstairs together, voices fading down the hall. I stood there longer than I should have, feeling stupid. All those nights, all those silences we shared, and she never mentioned him. The distance widened after that. She still said hello, but it was practiced, careful. I stopped going up with excuses. She stopped leaving any for me. But once, late at night, I heard the faint scrape of her chair dragging across the floor above mine. Then footsteps pacing. Back and forth, back and forth. It made me wonder if she was thinking of me, or if I'd only imagined it all from the start. The confusion pressed harder than the silence. One night, I pulled out my phone and typed, "I didn't know you had a son. I wish you'd told me." I stared at it, thumb hovering over send. The glow of the screen lit up my empty apartment. Delete. Rewrite. I miss RT. Delete again. Finally, I set the phone face down, unsent messages buzzing in my head louder than any notification could. The next morning, I passed her in the stairwell. She was alone this time, dressed for work, hair pinned up neatly. She smiled, polite, distant. "Morning," she said, her hand brushing the railing as she walked past me. I almost said her name. I almost asked why she never told me. But the words stuck. My throat felt packed with unsaid things. So I just nodded, stepping aside to let her pass. By the time I got downstairs, I realized my hands were shaking. That night, I sat on the couch, staring at the empty chair across from me. The one where she'd once curled her legs under herself, sipping tea, asking questions she half answered herself. The chair stayed empty. And the message on my phone stayed unsent. It was raining the night it finally broke. Not a storm, just that steady, curtain-like drizzle that makes everything softer, more fragile. I'd come back late, backpack damp, shoes squeaking on the stairs. She was already there, standing outside her door with her keys in hand, staring at the lock like she couldn't quite remember how it worked. We both froze. She let out a small laugh, breathless. "Guess we keep running into each other." Her hair was damp at the edges, clinging to her sweater. I noticed her hands shaking as she tried the key again. I stepped forward. "Here," I said. My voice felt too loud in the hallway. "Let me." Our fingers brushed as I steadied the key in her hand, guiding it into the lock. The click of it turning was sharper than it should have been. She exhaled. Then, almost reluctantly, she pushed the door open. "You might as well come in. No sense standing in the rain." Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon and something sweet, like bread cooling on the counter. We stood in the kitchen, neither of us taking off our shoes, puddles forming beneath us. Finally, she said, "I didn't mean to hide him. My son. I thought, if I told you, it would change things." I leaned against the counter, heart thudding. It did. Her face tightened, but she didn't look away. "I'm sorry." The words hung there, heavy. I should have said it was fine, but it wasn't. Not really. I shook my head. "You don't have to be sorry. Just, honest." She looked down at her hands, fingers twisting together. Then, quietly, "I liked having you around. More than I should have." That hit something deep, raw. For weeks I'd carried the possibility in silence, and now it was real, spoken aloud. I swallowed hard. So did I. The rain pattered against the window, filling the space between us. We didn't move closer, not yet. But everything in me leaned toward her. She finally looked up. Her eyes were damp, though not from the rain. I don't know what this is supposed to be. I don't even know if it can be anything. My throat ached. Me neither. And then silence again. Not empty, just full. I set my bag down, slowly. She didn't stop me. Her hand was resting on the counter, close enough that I could see the faint veins beneath her skin. I placed mine near it. Not touching. Just there. She noticed. Her breath caught. And then, barely, she shifted her fingers so they brushed mine. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't some dramatic confession. Just that quiet, human thing, two hands finding each other in the middle of all the doubt. She let out a shaky laugh. God, it's been years since I've let anyone this close. I squeezed her fingers gently. Then maybe it doesn't have to end here. She looked at me, really looked, and for once she didn't pull back. Okay, she whispered. And that was enough. Time didn't suddenly change after that night in her kitchen. No fireworks. No rushing declarations. Just, shifts. Small ones, steady as the rain that had brought us inside together. I still heard her footsteps above mine, but now they carried a different weight. Not distance, not absence. Just life. On mornings I left at 8:47 sharp, she'd already be at the mailbox, pretending it was coincidence. Sometimes she'd hand me my mail before I reached for it. Sometimes I'd bring her coffee, black, no sugar. She teased me once for remembering. I told her I'd been paying attention longer than she thought. We didn't try to explain ourselves. Not to the neighbors, not even to each other. Daniel came and went, her son, and she introduced me properly this time. Not as a stranger, but not as anything else either. Just someone who happened to be there. He gave me that same polite nod, and I nodded back, and that was enough. The bench outside the building became ours in a quiet way. Evenings, when the air cooled, we'd sit there with mugs of tea balanced on the ledge. We didn't always talk. Sometimes she read while I scrolled through my phone, both of us pretending we weren't waiting for the other to break the silence. Sometimes I'd fold the corner of her page down for her when she set the book aside. There were still pauses. Still hesitations. She'd say something like, "You don't know what you're giving up," and I'd answer with, "Maybe I'm not giving anything up." Neither of us pressed further. We both knew the words mattered less than the fact that we kept showing up. Her apartment was different from mine, warmer, messier in places. I started to notice the little things, how she left the light on over the sink, how she said softly, "I haven't had company like this in years." I didn't answer right away. Just let the words settle between us. Then I reached over, brushing my fingers against hers like I had in her kitchen. This time, she didn't hesitate. She laced her hand through mine, firm and steady. And that was it. No grand ending, no sharp beginning. Just two neighbors, in the same place at the same time, deciding, quietly, that maybe this was enough.